At 2:25 a.m., a single light began flashing deep inside a Soviet bunker. It wasn't an alarm for a drill. It wasn't a test. According to the system, the United States had just launched 5 nuclear missiles. Inside the control room, officers froze. Procedures were clear. If the warning was confirmed, retaliation was mandatory. Within minutes, the order to launch could be given, and once that order was sent, there would be no stopping it. But one man didn't move. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov stared at the screen and felt something was wrong. The computers were certain. The protocol was absolute. History said trust the machine. But instinct said the machine was lying. Outside that bunker, millions of people slept, unaware that the fate of the world now depended on a single decision made in silence. If Petrov followed orders, nuclear war would begin before sunrise. If he was wrong, the Soviet Union would be defenseless. There was no second opinion, no time for debate, no undo button, just a man, a blinking light, and the end of the world waiting on an answer.
This is the story of the night humanity almost erased itself, and the decision that saved it. Act 1. The Cold War pressure cooker. To understand why that blinking light mattered, you have to understand the world it existed in. In 1983, the Cold War wasn't cooling down, it was overheating. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a standoff that had lasted nearly 4 decades. 2 superpowers armed with enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet several times over. And both sides believed the same thing. If we hesitate, we die. That year, tensions reached a breaking point. The United States had just announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, a missile shield the Soviets feared could neutralize their nuclear deterrent. American Pershing II missiles were being deployed in Western Europe, weapons that could reach Moscow in minutes, not hours. To the Kremlin, this looked less like defense and more like preparation for a first strike. Then, on September 1st, 1983, something happened that shattered what little trust remained.
A Soviet fighter jet shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 after it accidentally entered Soviet airspace. All 269 people on board were killed, including an American congressman. The world was outraged. The Soviets were defensive, and both sides began expecting the worst from the other. Inside the Soviet military, paranoia hardened into policy. Every radar signal was suspect. Every anomaly was treated as a potential attack, because history had taught them a brutal lesson. The first country to detect an incoming nuclear strike might be the only one that survives. This fear gave birth to a system called OCO, an early warning satellite network designed to detect U.S. missile launches the moment they left the ground. It was supposed to remove human error.
To make nuclear retaliation automatic, unemotional, certain. But automation comes with a dangerous assumption that machines never lie. By the fall of 1983, OCO was newly deployed, untested, and already under immense pressure to prove itself. And on one quiet night in September, it would do exactly what it was designed to do. Whether it was right or wrong would no longer matter.
Act 2. The Night of the Alarm. It was just after midnight, September 26, 1983. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was on duty at Serpukhov 15, a secret Soviet early warning bunker. This wasn't a combat post. It was an observation post. Petrov's job was simple: monitor the system and report what it saw. The room was quiet, dimly lit, screens glowing green. Then, without warning, the silence broke.
A red word flashed across the main screen. Launch. According to the OCO satellite system, an American intercontinental ballistic missile had just been fired from the United States. Protocol was immediate. Petrov was required to report this up the chain of command, where retaliation would begin. But before he could move, the system spoke again.
Another alert, then another, then another. The computer now showed 5 incoming nuclear missiles, not 1, 5. The system classified the warning as highest confidence. In Soviet doctrine, this was it. If the report was confirmed, the Soviet Union would launch everything it had. Within minutes, the world would end.
Officers around Petrov stared at the screens. Some panicked, others waited for orders. Every second mattered. Petrov knew the rules. He knew the consequences. If he reported a false alarm, he could be punished. If he failed to report a real attack, he could start a war, or lose one. He had only minutes to decide.
Petrov looked closer. 5 missiles. Not hundreds. Not a full strike. Just 5. It didn't make sense. A real American first strike would be overwhelming. Mean to destroy the Soviet response before it could launch. This looked wrong, and Petrov trusted logic more than the machine.
Against protocol, against training, against the computer screaming in front of him, Petrov made his decision. He reported the alert as a false alarm. No missiles were launched. No retaliation followed. The blinking light stayed on. The world held its breath.
Act 3. The aftermath and the truth. Minutes passed. No explosions. No confirmations from ground radar. No reports of incoming missiles. Slowly, the tension inside the bunker began to crack. What the satellites claimed was not matching reality. Petrov was right. The alarms were false. But instead of relief, something else followed. Silence.
Because what Petrov had just done, violating protocol during a nuclear alert, wasn't heroic in the eyes of the system. It was dangerous.
In the days that followed, Petrov wasn't praised. He wasn't promoted. He wasn't even thanked. Instead, he was questioned. Why didn't he follow procedure? Why did he trust his instincts over the computer? The official report focused not on the failure of the system, but on Petrov's deviation from orders. The incident itself was buried, classified, hidden, erased from public knowledge.
Years later, the truth finally emerged. The satellites had misread sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds, mistaking it for missile launches. A simple alignment of angles. A flaw no one had fully anticipated. The system designed to remove human error had nearly caused the very disaster it was meant to prevent, and the only thing standing between humanity and nuclear war was one man who hesitated.
Stanislav Petrov quietly left the military. He lived a modest life, largely unknown to the world he had saved. No monuments were built. No parades were held. For decades, his name meant nothing outside a few declassified documents. Yet historians now agree on one thing. If Petrov had followed protocol that night, history would have ended in 1983.
The Cold War eventually faded. The weapons remained, and so did the lesson. Technology can calculate, it can detect, it can warn, but it cannot judge. That night proved something terrifying and something hopeful. Sometimes, the future of the world comes down to a single human decision, made in silence.
The world never heard the alarm. Cities never burned. History continued as if nothing happened, but on one quiet night in 1983, humanity came closer to extinction than it ever knew. No speeches, no countdowns, just a man who chose to think when a machine demanded obedience. The Cold War didn't end that night, but the world survived it, not because of technology, not because of power.
Because someone hesitated. If you were in his place, with minutes to decide the fate of the world, would you have trusted the computer or your instincts?